Singapore takes a clear step towards polling. This comes with the formation of the Electoral Boundaries Review Committee, or EBRC. The move comes ahead of Singapore's next general election, which must be held by November this year. In a statement by the Elections Department, the EBRC will review the boundaries of current electoral divisions. It will then recommend the number and boundaries of Group Representation Constituencies, or GRCs, and Single-Member Constituencies, or SMCs. In its work, it will take into account population shifts and housing developments. Prime Minister Lawrence Wong has also directed the registration officer to update the registers of electors before the 1st of April. Now, this is meant to bring the registers up to date. Public inspection of the registers will be opened in February.
With all this, the countdown has now begun for Singapore's next general election, which must take place by November this year. I spoke to one analyst who says the report could be finalized between 1 to 3 months.
I think if we are going to see an election, it probably will be in May, just before the June holidays. So do expect perhaps after Labor Day. And then, of course, PM Lawrence Wong will probably tap on a May Day rally speech as well.
In past elections, the time between the EBRC being set up and the election being called has ranged from 3 to 11 months. There's no set deadline for the review to be completed. Between now and the election, observers expect political parties to ramp up their visits to the various constituencies, and that could mean more flyers in your mailbox or more home visits from members of the various political parties.
For those people who are already walking the grounds, they will step up, but, they do not have to worry too much. However, if that particular GRC is being splintered off or into smaller GRC, or even an SMC somewhere, then that changes the game as well. And so the strategy of these political parties, might want to have a rethink of who they're going to put in which constituency moving forward.
If there are more than one opposition party seeking to contest in a particular constituency, then there will have to be those negotiation and that will have to take place because I think the opposition parties are aware, that anything other than a straight fight between the PAP and the opposition party, that it's not going to work well for the third political party contesting in a constituency.
And with empty spots in some constituencies, you might also want to keep an eye out for new faces around the neighbourhood going around greeting residents. Observers say this is the time for political parties to start introducing potential candidates to voters.
But different parties, will have different strategies. So for example, the ruling party, if, for example, they are going to feel a high-flying public servant, he or she, will not be able to walk the ground as yet because he or she is probably still serving in the public sector, and they are not supposed to. In their role as public servants, to take on political activities.
So far, the EBRC has been directed to keep the average size of GRC's proportion of MPs elected from SMCs and the average ratio of electors to MPs similar as that in the last GE.
Let's take a closer look at what the Electoral Boundaries Review Committee is. The committee's job is to recommend the number, size, and boundaries of group representation constituencies and single-member constituencies. In doing so, they have to factor in changes in the number of electors in current electoral divisions and new housing developments. The terms of reference for the committee are set out by the Prime Minister. For the last 3 general elections, then Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong had directed the committee to reduce the size of the GRCs and to create more SMCs. So who's in the committee? It's typically made up of civil servants from the Singapore Land Authority, Housing and Development Board, Department of Statistics, and the Elections Department. In recent years, the committee has been chaired by the Cabinet Secretary. Now, for more analysis, we're now joined by Associate Professor Eugene Tan from the SMU School of Law. Professor Tan, welcome to the program. So, for a start, we heard there from Dr. Felix Stein. He's expecting the general elections to be held in May. Do you agree with his assessment?
I would agree with Dr. Felix Tan. I think May is a very suitable date from various aspects. One is it enables the ruling party to build on the momentum from significant announcements during the budget debates. We know that the budget statement will be delivered on 18 February, and more than a week later, MPs will debate the statement, followed by the different budgets of the estimates for the various ministries. And you would also have, as Dr. Tan mentioned, the May Day rally, right, which typically the Prime Minister would make a significant speech. We're talking about engaging, with the ordinary worker. And in recent years, the May Day rally has always been a significant platform. But I wouldn't exclude the possibility of, a general election, perhaps, in late April. The EBRC, could finish its work in about a month if it needs to, or even if you take 2 to 3 months, right? It segues quite nicely, to the end of the budget debates, and I think that would set up, the stage quite nicely for a general election in April or May.
So you're predicting April or May. From what you know, Professor Tan, how complicated is the work of the EBRC? I mean, what are the potential challenges that the committee might face here?
Well, certainly the EBRC has a very demanding, and perhaps even unenviable task, because no matter how the recommendations that it makes, there will be political parties, which will be upset, with the way the committee would have recommended the boundaries, to be redrawn. So I think when you look at the drawing of electoral boundaries, right, the EBRC has to bear in mind the terms of reference that have been given by the Prime Minister, right? So it doesn't have that free hand. And secondly, redrawing boundaries or adjusting boundaries is really, in my view, more of an art rather than a science. Where do you think the boundary should end? Should it turn at this major junction, or should it be at the other major junction? So I don't think, you will have a situation where everyone will be pleased. And, there are currently 31 SMCs and GRCs. So when you adjust the boundaries of one, there will certainly, be, that knock-on effect. And I think it's really managing the expectations of political parties, the candidates, as well as Singaporeans, and I think, the EBRC is very mindful of the need, to be fair. But not only that, but also to be seen to be fair. And I think we should give them the benefit of the doubt, that they will go about their task without fear or favor. I think, they are not there to draw the boundaries, to cater to, the complexities of each individual political party. Some parties are less affected than others, so if you look at the People's Action Party or the Workers' Party, they're less affected for the People's Action Party because they are represented across the island. So boundary changes, will not affect them. The WP's approach has been to contest in contiguous constituencies, right? So even if boundaries are redrawn, they would still have a good coverage of, the redrawn boundaries. The problem really lies with, the smaller parties, right, where they contest in a few seats. And so that is where, sometimes when the boundaries get redrawn, the ground that they've walked, for the last couple of years, may fall, into a different constituency that another political party, another opposition party, would have been walking the ground. So I would say, very demanding, and unenviable, but I think they will certainly do their best. One hopes that they will explain in greater detail, the choices that they make with regards to how the boundaries are redrawn.
All right, thank you so much for those insights, Professor Tan. But don't go off just yet. We will be coming back to Professor Tan to discuss how electoral boundaries are decided.